Greetings, men of 222. It's great to be with you today. We are continuing our Common Men, Uncommon Story series, and today we're going to talk about Job. In almost all of the sermons that I've ever heard preached about Job, I've never heard one single one preached on Job the man or Job the father. They talk all the time about Job and his patience and his perseverance, but nobody ever talks about Job himself. So, today I want to talk about Job. And when I searched the scriptures, looking, if you will, for men of high character, men who are great dads, men who are great men, men who are great fathers in particular, I can only show you three that I know of. One is Joseph, who was Jesus' stepfather. Boaz, we can make some assumptions that he was a good father. And then lastly, Job himself. Now, certainly you have Daniel and you have Stephen and you have the Apostle Paul and men who are good men, but that's really not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for somebody that really is an example that we can look up to as a father and as a man, in particular as a father. And I'm amazed how much, Job is a very long book. I think it's 42 chapters, but at any rate, it's a long book. And I'm amazed at how much the Bible shares about Job in just a few paragraphs. Starting in Job 1:1, here's what we read. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless. He was upright, he feared God, and he turned away from evil. Wow. Blameless. That is, he was a man of honor. He was a man that was righteous. His character, his carriage was one of a man who was one of honor, if you will. He was upright. He treated others fairly. He was a man of commitment. When he told them something, he did what he said he would do. He feared God. Sometimes we don't really understand what that means because we've kind of watered it down in this day and age. But listen to what Proverbs 8:13 says about what the fear of the Lord is. It says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. And then it goes on and it says this, pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverted mouth I hate. God speaking. Wow. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride, how's your pride doing these days? Think about it really, seriously. Maybe you don't call yourself prideful, but look at the way you carry yourself and ask yourself, how many of the things that I do I do because of my pride, my arrogance? Because, if you will, there is evil in my heart, right? Jeremiah said the heart is deceitful, very wicked. Right? How about your mouth? Fear of the Lord. The Lord says, I hate a perverted mouth. So in our grid that we talk about, manhood action language, fear of the Lord is the habit of a champion. That is one of the habits of a champion. So Job turned away from evil. And in order to do that, we can tell that he was a man of initiative. You have to be specific. You have to be bold. You have to intentionally, there's that word again, you have to intentionally turn away from things that you know are evil. So what is Job's story? Well, Job had 7 sons and he had 3 daughters. And he had a boatload of property, 7,000 sheep, 500 oxen, 3,000 camels. And the Bible says, and that man was the greatest of all the men of the East. It says, his sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day. I assume that means birthday. And they would send and invite for their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of feasting had completed the cycle, Job would send and consecrate them. That is to say, to consecrate is to set them apart as holy. He would go before the Lord, and here's what he would do. Rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all, Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. Another word for continually is ceaselessly. And in 1 Thessalonians 5 and 17, the Apostle Paul says to us, pray without ceasing. And that is exactly what Job did. He prayed continually. Without ceasing is the best illustration I've ever heard was from Dr. Charles Stanley, who said it's like the ocean. When it comes on the beach, it comes in and then it goes out, but then it comes back in and it goes back out, and it never stops. It does it continuously. It does it ceaselessly, if you will. And that's what Paul says we should do in relationship to praying for our children and our grandchildren. And by the way, notice that Job wasn't even absolutely sure that they had sinned. He was just praying in case they had. Probably ought to pray that about ourselves, right? Now in Job 1, verses 6 through 11, this is the first time Satan comes to God, and we read this. Well, first of all, Satan means accuser or to accuse. So we know he is there to, and the Bible calls him the accuser of the brethren, okay? So he begins his attack on Job in Job 1, 6 through 11. And he says, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from roaming about on the earth and walking around on it. Now we ought to learn something from that. Satan and the demons have been given some level of control on the earth, and that's where they spend their time. Not in heaven, because they've been thrown out of heaven. So the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth. A blameless and upright man, fearing God, turning away from evil. And Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Job said, look, the reason Satan said, look, the reason that Job follows you is because you've prospered him. God was proud of Job. But Satan said, hey God, look, the only reason that Job obeys you is that you bless him and you favor him. By the way, that is my translation. So take away your blessing and watch him curse you to your face. So in Job 2, verses 1 through 3, Satan makes the same challenge later after God has taken away the basics from Job. Even though his livestock was wiped out and his children were killed, the Bible tells us through all this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. Nor did he blame God. Can you imagine? Your fortune is destroyed and all of your kids are killed, and yet you don't blame God. Job's relationship with the Lord was unbelievable. In fact, in Job 1, verse 20, we read this. Job arose and this is when he found out his kids had been killed and he'd lost all his livestock. And here was his initial reaction, not later, right away. Here's what he said. Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshiped. Not complained, he fell to the ground and worshiped. Wow. Man, that's way above the way I would behave and react. So Satan ups the ante in Job 2, 4 through 10, and he says this. Satan answered the Lord and said, yeah, but skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. However, put forth your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. So he said, look, you've taken away all these other things, but you haven't come at Job personally. Mess him up, Lord, and watch, he'll curse you. And so God said, behold, he's in your power, only spare his life. Make life miserable for him, but spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord, and he smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his feet to the crown of his head. So badly that Job actually had to take a broken pot piece, and scrape the boils off of him because they were so bad, while he was sitting among the ashes. Well, his wife then was very encouraging, right? No. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God and not accept adversity? In all this, listen, in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Remember I told you last week about Arthur Ashe, the great tennis player? He said, look, I didn't complain at Wimbledon when I won it. I didn't complain at the U.S. Open. And I didn't complain when I got AIDS. Because the fact of the matter is, God is in charge. Ashe understood that. Let's be honest for a minute, though. As it relates to sovereignty, a lot of people don't like God's sovereignty. They bristle at it. It's not so much that they hate the fact that God is supreme or that even that he's in charge, unless we get a result that we don't like. One of the most difficult things that I've ever had to think through theologically was the death of Jared Piles. And when Jared died, many folks tried to explain that God didn't want that to happen. Well, I'm not sure I'd phrase it that way, but here's what I do know. If it were not in God's plan, Jared would not have died. That was the day that Jared was going home. Why? I have no clue. I have no idea. I just know it was in God's plan, or it would never have happened. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. And we can debate about whether anybody's really good because we're all sinners. But some of us are certainly a lot better than others. And bad things do happen to good people, or at least better people. And sometimes good things happen to bad people. And boy, that really honks us off, doesn't it? Because we just can't understand. God, why do you let that guy have so much when he's such an evil person? And we don't know the answer, and we're not going to know the answer this side of heaven. But it has to be so, or otherwise God is not God. He is sovereign. Nothing happens without his approval. So, what are the takeaways from the story of Job? We can see from Scripture that Job was a man of honor. He was a man of commitment. He had a fear of the Lord in a very healthy sense. He was a man of initiative. He battled against his evil thoughts. We can see that he was a man of prayer. He was a loving father who went out to protect his kids through prayer. We can see that he hated evil. Scriptures tell us that. Job was a great father. He was a great man. Did he fail on occasion? Sure. But he never renounces or turns his back on God. When tough times befall us, we need to trust God, not understand the reasons for the tragedy. Let me say that again. When tough times befall us, we need to trust God, not understand the reasons for the tragedy, because we're just not going to know. But never forget, God has suffered as well. He watched Jesus die on the cross. Jesus was perfect. Jesus had no sin. There was no reason for that other than that is the plan that God had to save mankind, those who would place their trust in Jesus Christ for salvation. I hope you've done that. Hey, be intentional this week as you honor Jesus. See you next Saturday, Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise.